Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Star Wars Breaking Canon, a podcast where we break down and analyze each live-action entry in the Star Wars universe, from the original trilogy to The Mandalorian and beyond. I'm James Callahan.
I'm Joseph McCorkle.
I'm Julius Freeman.
And on this week's episode, we're discussing 1977's Star Wars Episode IV, A New Hope, written and directed by George Lucas. But before we get into our discussion, I wanted to take a moment to introduce the format of this podcast. Each week on our show, we will cover an entry in the Star Wars canon, making our way through the series chronologically in release order. Each episode will be split into two sections. The first section will begin with our individual thoughts about the subject, followed by an open discussion about the subject's story, production history, and overall impact on the Star Wars canon. In the second section of the show, we will break down our favorite aspects of the subject into specific categories, covering the various detail and trivia of the film or television episode in question. And following that, we will each give the entry a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 and conclude the episode with a Breaking Canon average. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's get into our discussion of A New Hope. Julius, why don't you start us off? Tell me about your first experience seeing the film, how you felt about the movie then, and how you feel about the movie now.
I loved it. I watched it when I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old. It was on TV, cable TV. I forget which channel, but it was in the cable channel. And once I saw the lightsaber, but when I was a kid, I thought it was a laser sword, right? A laser sword. Wow, a laser sword. This is so cool. And that's what hooked me in to sit down and actually start watching this old grainy movie. Because, when you're at that age, old grainy movies are not really fun to watch. They kind of remind you of like your parents and you're kind of like, I don't want to watch this crap. But that's what kept me in front of the TV. And then the rest of the story was just awesome. Flying, jets in space against a planet-sized space station, and the Force and Darth Vader and all those elements that made Star Wars what it is really sucked me in, because I was also an action adventure kid too. So I loved action adventure movies, even as a kid. And I was always a very active kid too. So Star Wars it had that same energy, and which is why I loved it so much, and I still love it to this day.
How about you, Joseph?
Yeah, I first saw Star Wars in the special edition in 97, and it just blew me away. It was really the first kind of experience I had like that with a movie where it, in a really focused way, grabbed me emotionally. Later, I watched Empire, I think, in sophomore year of high school, which was like 2 or 3 years later. So for a while, for me, Star Wars was just this movie. And even still, that was like a huge world unto itself.
So you kind of wanted to experience it the way they did in 77. You were like, I love this movie. I don't want to see the sequel for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, 20 years later, I was the guy who was like, no spoilers, no spoilers.
Yeah, that must have been interesting to dodge all of the very obvious spoilers of Empire. Yeah, for me, I was really racking my brain this week trying to remember the exact circumstance of how I saw this movie, because it was a franchise and a trilogy that was always on my radar, but I was very confused with what it was. I felt like there was so much mythology there, and so much. I'd see books, I'd see TV shows and all kinds of stuff, and I just didn't know what Star Wars was at all. And so I was trying to figure out like what my initiation was. And I definitely saw clips of it in shows like Muppet Babies and references to...
That's right. You're right about the Muppet Babies. I totally forgot about that.
They would cut in clips.
Yeah. I totally forgot about that. Wow.
Guys, I went deep on this because I wanted to pinpoint the moment. And so all of this was sort of in my subconscious, right? And I do remember seeing the Ewok Adventure when I was a kid. I had a friend who had it recorded on videotape, and we would watch it. And it was like the cheesiest, dorkiest thing I'd ever seen. And yet I was like still into it, because there's just something about the iconography and that specific Star Wars aesthetic that immediately drew me in from the get-go. And so as I was trying to figure this out, I remembered that I had a friend who lived in the same apartment complex as me, and he had an N64, and we would play games like Super Mario 64, and we played GoldenEye. And so in late 1996, Late 96, he got Shadows of the Empire, and I loved that game. And I kept asking him questions over and over.
Great.
Who's that character? Oh, that's Boba Fett. Who's that character? Oh, that's Dash Rendar. Oh, who's that? That's Luke Skywalker, you moron. So like that. So he's kind of like helping me through this. A couple months later, he has a birthday party. And the birthday party is to go to the movies to go see The Empire Strikes Back. And so I'd heard that the movies were being re-released in this special edition format. And so kind of the way I do everything in life, I procrastinated until the night before, and my parents took me to go see A New Hope special edition, like the last day it was going to be in theaters, right before The Empire Strikes Back came out. And I believe I saw it on February 20th or February 21st, 1997. And it's so strange to me because when I saw the movie, I feel like my impression of it at that moment was almost irrelevant. It was sort of my gateway to play with the toys and to sort of play in that sandbox and understand what everything meant. And it just opened the whole thing up to me. And it wasn't until years later that I finally figured out how big of a deal that movie was, and maybe the most impactful movie-going experience of my entire life. And I remember seeing it at 12 and thinking at the time, like, this movie's super dated. Like, I was very like, even at that age, I was very pretentious about it. Like, I had just seen Independence Day less than a year before that. And that movie had such state-of-the-art special effects and was also so obviously influenced by Star Wars in so many ways. And I was definitely the kind of person that was more into remakes and more into the movies that were influenced by older films because, like, I had a really hard time connecting and getting into old movies. And I think Star Wars: A New Hope was kind of my gateway drug into watching classic films. I think I was like tricked into appreciating classic cinema by this movie because it would become a movie that I would see over and over again, and by default learn a lot about how movies were made just by watching this film over and over again. Going back to when I saw this film in 1997, it was a real interesting crash course for me. And I don't want to talk about too much about my experience seeing The Empire Strikes Back the very next day. But long story short, I ended up cramming the entire trilogy into a weekend, and I was basically like a super fan. Like I was a novice on Friday, and I was a super fan by Monday, and I was obsessed with it at that point. And yeah, I mean, A New Hope is kind of the gateway to that. So I have a question for you guys, and I was thinking about this while I was watching the movie yesterday. I think Star Wars, an argument can be made that Star Wars is the greatest film ever made.
That's up for debate.
Did we even ever actually need another Star Wars movie after this one? And I'm glad that there were more Star Wars movies, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing this podcast. But I love this film. I think stands out among everything within the canon as being completely self-contained. You could actually leave the theater, turn off the movie, and if you find out there was never another Star Wars movie, you'd still be satisfied, because it tells such a self-contained, start to finish sort of hero's journey, hero's arc story. And it's just such a satisfying film. It's broad strokes fantasy storytelling, and it doesn't really have anything in it that's like, I think, ambiguous in any way. It's just very straightforward. And I think that it's one of those movies that even if at the time this wasn't necessarily the director's intent, he made all of the right choices. And I think that because of the limitations in the budget and the special effects at the time, he was only able to do, what he was able to do, but it turned out to be perfect. Those limitations made the film better. And we'll go into that as we, go into like behind the scenes stuff and everything else. But it's one of those movies that, because of how self-contained it is and how perfect the movie is, it strikes me as one of those movies, just a small handful of movies that feel absolutely timeless.
I'll agree with you to a certain extent. And the reason why I can't completely agree with that is because Darth Vader remains alive in the end of the movie.
True.
So obviously there was an intention for a second film, regardless if it was going to happen or not. And thankfully it did happen. So I think that you're right to an extent that, yes, the Star Wars: A New Hope is definitely can be a self-contained movie, because we get that ending when Princess Leia gives out the medals to both Han and Luke. And which, by the way, I have to say, it was a shame that they didn't give one to Chewbacca because he deserved one too.
Yeah. One of the most controversial things in Star Wars history.
One of the most controversial things, exactly.
Really quick, I noted in this rewatch that Chewie actually gets the last line at the very end of the movie. He actually he growls and yells, and I think he's complaining about not getting a medal. He's like, "What is the Rebel Alliance?"
Exactly why he was growling.
I think the Rebel Alliance is kind of racist. If you notice in that celebration, and you look at that room, I don't know. It looks a little fascist and a little human. Is all I got to say.
Yeah. So to finish my point, it can be self-contained, but it's not, because what's left open is Darth Vader. What happens to Darth Vader? And I would imagine if I was a moviegoer in 1977 when the movie was released, and after a satisfying ending, you had to leave the theater wondering what happened with Darth Vader. What's going to happen next?
What do you think, Joseph? Like, I don't want to give away necessarily like our overall thoughts, our ratings of this film, but I don't know, like, what do you think about this movie's place in film history? Because this is going to be one of the only movies we're going to talk about in that context, because it really is kind of important in that context, and everything that comes after is important more in a Star Wars context.
Yeah, this is like Library of Congress material, like the just original New Hope Star Wars is a really effective distillation of very timeless feelings and story arc elements. Talking about the hero's journey, I was kind of thinking you could make the case that A New Hope is its own very condensed hero's journey, but then there's also one for the whole original trilogy, and then there's also kind of one for Luke's whole life.
Definitely. It's one of the things that I love about this film, and just watching it yesterday and trying to watch it without the baggage of its place in pop culture and of course everything that followed, just watching this movie on its own as its own entry point into the canon. And it's a movie that has really no baggage to it. There aren't any big reveals. There's no big real mysteries to it. And I think so much of where the series goes in subsequent films, and as much as Lucas tries to say that the whole thing was planned out, it's very apparent while you're watching this movie that Darth Vader is not Luke's father. He just kind of got lucky that Obi-Wan hesitates when he's asked about, who Darth Vader is or whatever happened to his father. And I think it's the most clearest when Obi-Wan confronts Darth Vader and tells him that he's only a master of evil, Darth. Like he's referring to him by his first name. It's a very weird thing. And for my headcanon, I've tried to see that as like, oh, maybe he's taunting him by referring to him as his Sith title. But I don't know. Like, I think that that's kind of bullshit. I think that the way that Lucas wrote the script, like literally Mr. Vader, Darth was his first name,
No, yeah, definitely. Because this is the days long before franchise days where, you thought about the future movies. And this was just George Lucas was trying to make his sci-fi movie. He was uncertain about the future because throughout the production of this film, it looked like it was all going to fall apart for him because nothing was going the way he had envisioned. And so he probably, I'm just going to give it my all. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then I guess that's the end of my career.
It's interesting in preparation for the podcast, as we were discussing and doing our practice runs, that this became sort of an unexpected George Lucas reclamation project. I went into this starting out being kind of just like, kind of ambivalent towards Lucas. Like I definitely don't resent him the way that I did during the prequels, or I did before we did the podcast. But now I think, I read his autobiography, or his biography rather. And I did, through some of my research and everything else, I just realized that this guy is a genius that kind of goes beyond just being a genius director. He's a genius in the same sense that like Walt Disney was a genius. He's very good at putting things together and creating this kind of magic where even though at the heart of it, he's taking your money from you, you're like more than willing to give it to him because he's selling you something that you want. And I don't know, like, I think it's very interesting to me in hindsight, the way that he kind of, muddies up his own sort of mythology by talking about how he had 6 films planned out. And I mean, I think it's fun and kind of like an old man embellishing his past type of way. But like, if you go back, there are no receipts that imply that any of that is true. It just sounds like what he did was he wrote a script that was very plotty, and then maybe he took bits of plot and spread it out across 6 films.
Maybe he had the seeds of the ideas, because when you have seeds of an idea, they tend to grow and germinate in different ways that you never would have imagined. Because as a writer myself, there's times where I've written a story and I think about, oh, this would be a great, series if I just follow through with it. But they're just seeds of ideas. They're not completely fully formulated yet. So maybe he had an idea for 6 movies, but he just didn't know exactly what they were going to be yet until, the moment you start writing, that's when it starts coming out. That's when it starts formulating and making your own little mythological world. So maybe that's what happened. He had the intention, but he didn't know quite yet how to get there until Star Wars came out first, to see how that turned out. Because I think he was focused more on the themes of the film. That's what made the movie. I guess that's what connected to me with the movie, is the theme of Star Wars, which is, obviously like the collective unity of the 3 characters, the bravery of the heroes, heroism. Because I'm a sucker for heroes in film, so I that's why I connected with the film at that level.
And these heroes are fun. They're human. That's one of the things that I think is also remarkable about this movie, is that it takes place so far outside of the realm of any recognizable reality, yet its themes and its characters are very human. Everything they're going through is something that you can absolutely relate to, especially as a kid. Absolutely. And you can relate to through your whole life, which is why this movie is as meaningful to me now as a 36-year-old as it was when I was 12.
Yeah, I heard a lot of echoes of the dialogue, just the vibe from American Graffiti, and it translates well.
Yeah, this is definitely, it's weird because it doesn't feel like this movie is the logical progression of the director who made THX 1138. It also doesn't feel like the obvious next film to the guy that made American Graffiti, but it absolutely feels like the logical progression from THX and American Graffiti to take the 2 things together and sort of synthesize them to create something that became, the most universal film up until that point. I don't think that any movie had ever really captured the imagination. You can talk about Gone with the Wind, but Gone with the Wind was a novel that people already loved. It was a known property. And a lot of movies were kind of like that. They were known properties. You can talk about The Wizard of Oz, but that movie didn't become popular until it played on TV for years and years and years. I think it was a box office failure, if I'm not mistaken. And like Star Wars immediately captured the imagination of the entire world. And I don't think there's really been anything like it since.
I'll agree with that. Yeah, I think you're right. Because I've never felt like this about a movie. Yeah, not since Star Wars. That struck me, not only struck my imagination, but also struck my humanity, my inner core of my humanity, because we all deep down hate evil and oppressive forces, and we all want to fight against them. And I think that's what Star Wars encapsulates. It encapsulates that spirit of that potentially rebellious spirit when we're faced with an enemy like a Darth Vader or an empire that's run by a dictator, an authoritarian dictator in Palpatine and Grand Moff Tarkin, who, by the way, Grand Moff Tarkin, man, I forgot how freaking cold and soulless that character was when I watched the movie last night. I was like, dude, this guy's worse than Vader. Holy crap. I never thought it could happen.
It's funny to think about the politics in just A New Hope on its own. And not even, obviously I can't really watch the film now without thinking about what goes down in the prequels, but I was just thinking about like this guy, this governor, I guess, who's just so excited that the Empire finally got rid of the Senate so he can start blowing planets up.
Yeah. Seriously.
Like he's like, okay, these, political meddlers always getting in the way of them being able to do their evil shit. And finally, like they got rid of that. So the pesky Senate is gone. And now they can just start blowing up planets left and right.
That was a very powerful scene watching it again, where he just nonchalantly is like, yeah, just aim at that planet over there, Alderaan, and we'll see if she talks. And if she doesn't, we'll still blow it up. And he still blew it up, even though she told him, where the rebel base was at, which was cold, man. That was cold-blooded. Whew.
Did this movie kind of disturb you guys in any way when you were younger? Because even though it's obviously a kid's film, more people die in it than any kid's film I've ever seen. A planet of people blows up. That's like 2 billion. And then how many people are on that Death Star? And not only that, the stormtroopers straight up like torch Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. They just burn them. Like that is nuts. Like this is some like heavy stuff for a kid's film.
For me, not so much because it was all off screen. It'd be one thing if they showed it, then yeah, it'd be traumatizing. So it wasn't too disturbing. The only character that really freaked me out as a kid was Darth Vader. Darth Vader was the one where I was like, oh crap, I don't want to mess with this guy, because I was still too young to understand the malevolent nature of Grand Moff Tarkin. I kind of saw him as like an old man, a pesky old man who's annoying. But Darth Vader freaked me out as a kid because of the way he looked. He was all black, the mask, the breathing. And of course, James Earl Jones is a voiceover of the character. So it was a complete package for me of like, whoa, this character is freaking, he's scary.
It's such a like a cinematic synthesis of so many effective things happening at once. You have like the iconic costume and the mask.
Yeah. You
have the breathing. You have David Prowse, who's the actor, the physical actor who's underneath the costume. And then you have James Earl Jones, who has like one of the greatest and most distinct voices of all time. And you put all of that together to create the most iconic villain in movie history. Like, I remember seeing this movie for the first time. I know who Darth Vader was. I mean, who didn't know who Darth Vader was?
Right.
I didn't really know the context of his character. But yeah, I mean, do you guys think his introduction is like one of the best character intros in history? Because when he comes out of that smoke and like the music builds, it's great.
Yeah, it was fitting because I remember before I saw the movie, I was just like, I knew about Darth Vader. He was on my radar, and it was just like, ooh, that guy's bad. I don't know why, but that guy gets up to some harsh stuff. And then, like, sure enough, his first introduction, he comes barreling in.
One of the things that I loved about his character, and I had to have an action figure of him as soon as I saw the movie, and then it became one of the things that I think subconsciously fascinated me about this whole franchise, and also specifically this movie, is all of the little incidental details, like the little chest thing that he has that has the buttons and everything. And it's never, ever mentioned in the entire movie. Nobody asks him, hey, so what does that button do? Like, that never happens. And it's a better movie because of that. You have this feeling that everything is so tactile and real that if the camera were to just like pan, to the left or the right from the action, that there's an entire world of things going on. Every ship has buttons and gadgets, and they don't look like they were just randomly put there. It looks like you literally just took a camera and put it into this galaxy far, far away, because everything has that feeling of being very real and having that detail to it, which is another reason why this is a movie that I could put on and I feel like it's just instant escapism. Yeah. Even though it feels very much like a movie like from 1977, it feels timeless for that reason.
Yeah.
When you guys saw this movie for the first time, had you ever seen a movie that kind of dropped you in medias res, like just right into the action? I had never seen a movie that I think didn't have opening credits, that didn't kind of try to like ease you into like, oh, this is the movie. It's directed by this guy. It's written by this person and it stars these actors. It's just like, bam, you're in.
Yeah, I think it's like Darth Vader's chess panel in that it's all very evocative of just a completely different world.
Especially scenes like when the droids are taken onto the Sandcrawler, or especially during like the Mos Eisley Cantina scene, where every cutaway is just like makes this galaxy bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's right. One thing that I loved so much when I first saw this movie was just trying to imagine who all these people are. Like, they all have stories. We're focused on this one, but it doesn't feel like it's the only one that matters. It feels like there's so much else going on in the galaxy. I used to joke with you, Joseph, that it would be interesting to find out that like if we found out that other planets actually kind of didn't give a shit about what was going on with the rebels and the Empire. They're just like, yeah, they're just doing their thing. Who cares? Like they're just like absolutely cynical to the politics of the galaxy. They're like, look, I'm on Alderaan and none of this matters. Whatever. When we're introduced to Owen, it's really interesting to me because first and foremost, Owen strikes me as like such an asshole. I mean,
I was thinking the same thing, James. I was thinking the same thing.
I've always felt that way, but I was really focused on it this time. And I was like, this guy goes out of his way to just be a dick in every scene that he's in. And maybe that's why, like, I don't know, like, maybe you don't really care. Like, I feel bad for Beru. Like, neither of them deserve to be burned to death. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I guess if this gets Luke on his hero's journey, well, you know, I guess it was worth it.
Yeah, they had to go because Luke is established right away that he is very loyal. And so if they had remained alive, I don't think it would have been as impactful as it was, you know, having him show back, you know, go back to his home and seeing the two people he loved dead and massacred, you know, without any remorse at all. And so you needed that. I think they needed to go. And also, yeah, he was you're right, he was an asshole, but he was just protecting him because he knew his father. He knew Anakin. He knew what would potentially become if Luke wasn't guided properly, if he left the farm to fight in the rebellion. So maybe that's why he did it. I really didn't see him too much of an asshole, but I just saw more like he looked like a drunkard to me because of the 5 o'clock shadow, his messed up hair. He kind of like just like this old farmer, you know.
Are you saying the blue milk is spiked or?
Yeah, maybe, who knows?
I mean, honestly, what else is there to do on Tatooine, you know?
Have a moisture farm, apparently.
A moisture farm.
What is a moisture farm, by the way?
Yeah, to this day, I think I've tried to look it up and my eyes glazed over as I was reading about it. I still don't understand what that means, but I don't know. There's really nothing romantic about that. Can you imagine, like, you're trying to court your future wife, Beru, and you're just like, yeah, come live with me on my moisture farm in the middle of nowhere in a desert where you might get murdered by Tusken Raiders. Why would anybody choose that life? If anything, the stormtroopers put them out of their misery. It is weird the tensions between the Tusken Raiders and the farmers that, you know, they can't go out at night because they might get murdered by Tusken Raiders. I don't know, like, it's something that's kind of explored in future movies and TV, but I've always found that to be just brutal life. You know, if there's a cantina just a sand speeder ride away, like, why wouldn't you just like do whatever you had to do to get on the first transport off that shitty planet?
Well, it could be because of their socioeconomic place in the in the structure. So you never know. That's how most poor people end up stuck. They can't leave because they're stuck there.
So if they're farming moisture, I guess like the only thing they're really contributing to the galaxy and to the Empire is what, water and sand?
I'm assuming that's the case.
I mean, I'm sure there's like water-rich planets elsewhere, probably closer to the center of the galaxy. So
maybe not the Empire, because I know Tatooine's outside the Empire's reach, isn't it? Isn't it like a rogue planet? Or am I thinking the Republic?
The Republic,
the old
yeah.
Republic. Okay.
It sounds like the worst place in the world to live, and it's
right.
one of those things that makes it. I don't know, like you definitely, if you've ever been in a situation where you felt trapped, you can easily just relate to Luke Skywalker from the very beginning.
Yeah.
When I saw the film at a young age, like just this feeling of not being able to go anywhere unless a parent agreed to take me, you know, things like that were things that I instantly related to, and just wanting to escape and get out of that was something that was very relatable.
Right. But I was going to Tosh Station to pick up some power converters. that kind of idea of like,
I love Luke Skywalker very much. He's an all-time favorite character, but he has an arc in this trilogy where in the first film he's pretty annoying.
Yeah, because he's a teenager, and teenagers are annoying.
He whines, he's in love with his sister, he's going through a lot of weird stuff. A lot of weird stuff. Another thing that I think is so great about this film is it packs so much in to its like first 10 minutes. You get this amazing shot of the Star Destroyer. Like the camera pans down to the planet. The Star Destroyer is coming in. It's the biggest thing you've ever seen in your life. It's chasing after this smaller ship. You go on board, and like all of this stuff is happening, and no time is taken at all to establish what is going on. But it's amazing to me how perfectly communicated it is. Because I don't remember when I saw this movie ever, and I've never been since. I've seen the movie like 50 times at this point. I have never been bored. I immediately am like pulled in from that opening.
Like you said, the first opening shot. is like, whoa, you see the ship, being kind of flying into the screen, right? And then you see this massive ship, chasing it, and you're like, whoa, what the hell's going on? And now you're invested because now you want to know what's happening. And I like that Lucas chose to take it there. And I'm pretty sure a lot of movie executives were nervous that he did that, because they, for the most part, Hollywood producers think audiences are stupid. But in reality, if we are shown and told a certain thing a certain way, we'll get it. We'll understand, pick up on it. And I think that's why Star Wars works so well, is because George Lucas did not insult his audience. He trusted them. He said, okay, I'm just going to do it because I trust them. They get this. They will get this.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is, especially maybe to a young person that doesn't know the full history, Star Wars does feel like this thing now, especially 44 years removed from its release. That it's
44 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Shit.
It feels kind of like a foregone conclusion. It feels like it's been around forever, and that it's hard to imagine that there was a time where this didn't exist. And when you watch like some of the supplemental features about the movie's making and read about it, and when you look at like original concept art and storyboards and some of the initial story ideas, it's one of those movies that I feel like didn't actually come together until May 25th, 1977, when the movie was released. Like, I think that people were probably panicking up until the moment it came out, because I really think it's one of those things where like every special effect was being worked on, simultaneously with the rest of the movie, in post-production. They're developing all of this stuff while they're shooting, and nobody knows if any of this is going to work. And Lucas, like, I think came very close to having a heart attack from the stress of just working on this movie for like 4 years. And it wasn't until the movie was released to the public that he even knew it was going to work, that it was even going to make a penny.
Vindication. That's all I could say.
Oh,
use that word again.
The greatest vindication you could ever get.
Right.
Back then, there really wasn't a market for merchandising, and so when or really for sequels, and science fiction wasn't a big genre. So the fact that he sells this idea, I think, based on the strength and the success of American Graffiti to 20th Century Fox, and he kind of comes in under the radar with a relatively small budget. And, instead of asking for a big fee, he's like, no, just give me the sequel rights and the merchandise. And it's one of those things where it's like, I can't imagine being the executives that agreed to that and then kicking yourself for the next half century that you missed out on billions of dollars. Just left it on the table and said, yeah, fine, Lucas, keep your stupid sequels and your merchandise. Are you guys familiar with the term toyetic?
No.
It's not about toys.
It is about toys. It's a term referring to the suitability of a media property, such as a cartoon or movie, for merchandising tie-in lines of licensed toys, games, and novelties. So before Star Wars, there really wasn't an emphasis on creating toyetic things for your movie. And now a lot of movies are kind of created around a line of toys.
Yeah.
And so this movie kind of invented that. And it's one of those things, again, looking through some of the concept art for this movie, it's really interesting to me because this movie came very close to being off-putting, very off-putting. Like, there are things about the creatures, the droids, the stormtroopers, Vader, everything. All of this stuff initially looked like some kind of like really goofy and kind of off-putting sci-fi stuff. But when everything was done and you look at characters like C-3PO and R2-D2 and even Chewbacca, like you can imagine making stuffed animals out of this and action figures that are they're cute. Everything in this movie is like very cute. And that's another thing that's like a stroke of genius. Like, I have to give everyone involved credit for making a movie that is so instantly pulls you in and doesn't repel you from like grossness or like, oh, what were they thinking when they designed that creature? We'll get some of that in the prequels, but at least for now, these characters are all like instantly iconic, cute, fun. You want the toys, you want the stuffed animals, you want them on a t-shirt. So this movie has influences, obviously. In fact, I think it pulls together a whole lot of stuff. We were talking about the hero's journey. Are you guys familiar at all with the monomyth and the hero's journey? Because I've tried to read it. And
oh man, it's a great book. It's a recommended read. I highly recommend it to anyone who thinks about being a writer of any kind, be it screenwriting or novel or playwright, whatever the case. Because Joseph Campbell, what he did in his book is that in his researches, he discovered that a lot of the different various cultures throughout the world had almost the same story. There was a hero's journey within their little culture, or cultures, I should say. And he found out there's a universal element in it, which is the hero is born, he's taken out of his element, he fights against adversaries, he has help on the way, be it with older, wiser people, or maybe he has someone who betrays them, and then they come back and they win, but they come back with what is now known as the elixir, which either could be new knowledge or stronger than they were before, or with new information. It doesn't really matter. It's just that's what he discovered, and it's a great book. It's not just about writing. It's just mainly about his research of these stories, these old tales.
I think that this movie and this franchise did a lot in the way of shaping my love of film and storytelling in a lot of different ways.
Right.
There's another film that I always think of that I think is maybe the closest comparison to the level of world building in one initial film that's not based on any other material. And that movie is The Matrix, where I think it's also building a very complex world that has a lot of different rules, and there's some exposition in it, and it has to kind of like get you sort of like acclimated to how this whole universe works. And it's combining not just aspects of like the monomyth, for example, but also like one of the interesting things about the influences on Star Wars is that Lucas initially wanted to adapt Flash Gordon, and he couldn't get the rights. Are you guys familiar with Flash Gordon at all?
I am, yeah.
Joseph, have you seen it at all?
Not so much.
Yeah, I've it's one of those things that for like the last 2.5 decades has been like on my to-do list to watch an episode of Flash Gordon to get some context, and I just still haven't gotten around to it. But I find it very interesting that Lucas is just this big nerd who really just wants to make a Flash Gordon movie, and they tell him no. They say you can't have Flash Gordon. So he's like, oh, well, I guess I'm gonna have to make my own shit up then. And it's this, multi-billion-dollar franchise.
And that's the best approach. That's the best way to go about it, in my opinion. Because I know, to add to what you're saying, James, I know that Steven Spielberg wanted to direct the James Bond movie, and he was in negotiation with that, but I guess they're hesitant. And I guess he was on vacation with George Lucas, and he told George Lucas, hey, I'm trying to make a James Bond movie, but I don't think they're going to bite. And George Lucas is like, I have something better. And so, what is it? It's called Indiana Jones. So that's awesome. So a lot of the times, I'm a big proponent of doing original stuff. Like, go for it, don't hesitate. And I was happy that, in hindsight, that they didn't give him Flash Gordon, because if they gave him Flash Gordon, we wouldn't have Star Wars.
We would not have Star Wars. It's a very interesting thing where you have a storytelling obstacle. As much as it's downplayed that this film doesn't really have anything more than maybe a kind of vague connection to the Kurosawa film, The Hidden Fortress, Lucas actually wanted to remake The Hidden Fortress as an English language film. And again, he wasn't able to get the rights to it. So that's another thing where that obstacle that was in his way forced him to do something original. And I don't know, like another example of why I think this movie should be on the short list of greatest movies of all time is because of all of those obstacles that stood in the way, forced the creator to come up with a completely new thing.
The universe wanted him to make Star Wars, James. That's what happened.
It's a manifestation of the Force.
Exactly. Exactly, Joseph.
I don't know. There's times where I wonder, especially when you listen to Lucas talk, if this guy like went forward in the future and Star Wars existed and he just wrote a bunch of notes down and then went back in time and just wrote it first. And like at first he's writing up his journal of the wills, about Mace Windu and the Jedi Bendu. And like, he's trying to figure out like, okay, what happened in that movie? Like, I can't remember. And he had to kind of do his own thing because so much of it feels like, how did you do this? How did you come up with this? When you listen to him talk, he just doesn't sound like he's, especially when you look at some of his notes for, his original ideas for the movie, like they're incomprehensible. It's all gibberish. And yet all of that gibberish over years molded into this movie that is understandable to anybody who's like 3 years old and over.
Yeah, it's so weird. If you look at any of the earlier scripts of A New Hope, the story is way less approachable. Some characters have slightly different names, but what we know and love as Star Wars now was not originally there. It really had to go through a lot of evolution to become the iconic film that got released.
Absolutely. It's weird too, because there's a lot of legendary stories about how there's a real changing of the guard when this film came out. 10 years beforehand, you have sort of like the rise of the golden age in American cinema, where your directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma were making these challenging films. And they looked at Lucas and Spielberg as like these children, like making their like wanting to make these kids movies, and they just didn't understand it. And as Lucas was writing Star Wars and showing it to his friends, they're all like, this is idiotic. Why are you wasting your time and your life on this thing? It's not good. And every time you bring us a new draft, you're just changing like a dumb name to a different dumb name. And we still don't understand what's going on in this idea. And, I think famously, like Brian De Palma saw an early cut of the film and was like, this is awful, George. I don't understand this. This is so stupid. And I guess he like offended him so much, and he just ripped the movie apart so much in front of Lucas's friends that as a peace offering, he said, you know what, I'll help you out. I'll rewrite the opening crawl for you. And so I guess Brian De Palma did some uncredited rewrites on that opening crawl.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that he did that.
And now, like, you look back at De Palma and Coppola and these guys, they're obviously a little, resentful of the success that Lucas had.
Of course they are.
But it's not just that. They're not like willing to take a step back and say, I was wrong. Now they claim like, oh, Lucas is the reason why the film industry sucks now. And I think you can make that argument to some extent, but I don't think that's entirely fair. And it's not fair to put that onto this movie, which is really a work of pure originality, as much as anything that any of those revered directors have ever made.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And also the sci-fi genre at the time was still very small. It wasn't as big as it is now. And I think a lot of people back then, especially in his group, George Lucas's group, they weren't really into sci-fi. They were into cinema. That's what they were focused on. Lucas came from a school of reading pulp, sci-fi pulp magazines and comic books. Jack Kirby was an influence. I think one of the influences. And Jack Kirby wrote a lot of space operas during his comic book career. He's the reason why Darkseid exists. He's the reason why the Fourth World exists and all those characters.
I actually, in some of my research, learned that Lucas was a huge fan of Jack Kirby. He was a huge fan of all of that mythology. And I mean, there's definitely some of that kind of comic book energy in this movie for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Kirby was the one of the first pioneers who explored the shared universe. Let's have this character, come in here and be part of the story. And he was the first one to explore that. One of the first ones anyway to explore it, not the first one. And you see that in George Lucas's trilogy, the original trilogy, where it's a shared, almost not a shared universe with other properties, but the trilogy being linked together. And so it's an interesting take that these directors who didn't get it at the time, they probably still don't get it, because like I said, sci-fi it's a very you have to have a certain kind of mindset to appreciate what sci-fi can be. And it's not just only a thinking man's genre. It can be fun too, like Star Wars or Flash Gordon. Fun sci-fi is always good sci-fi, in my opinion.
Well, and that's an interesting segue, because one thing that I think is so interesting about this movie and this franchise is the difference between the fact that it uses science fiction iconography to tell a fantasy story. And as a young kid, I thought it was clear as day that Star Wars was science fiction. And I didn't even know what a 2001 A Space Odyssey was at the time that I saw Star Wars. But when you see a movie like 2001 at the right age, you then go back and look at Star Wars and you're like, that's not science fiction really at all. It's just kind of like fantasy and sci-fi clothing.
Which is fine. That works well too. I mean, sci-fi
Absolutely.
fantasy is a genre in itself as well. So kudos to George Lucas for putting that together, and it worked.
That's a good way to put it, that Star Wars is fantasy with spaceships. It's really not sci-fi.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, again, you have a storyteller who is sort of like cobbling together all of these things, I think of Quentin Tarantino as being a very good example of this. If you look at a movie, especially a movie like Kill Bill, which is like him taking things that worked in like crappy, obscure movies that no one's really seen, or in foreign films and genre pictures that aren't on anybody's radar, and taking the best things and putting them together to make like the ultimate kind of movie experience. The Matrix is another example of that. And Star Wars is absolutely that. Like it would be nothing without like all of these sort of disparate pieces of pop culture and mythology all kind of coming together to make this just 2-hour piece of like pop storytelling. There aren't a lot of examples of that are successful examples of that.
I think it's unfortunate that when something really original comes out, a lot of times it flops. And I think the danger of that is that when something like that does flop, is Jupiter Ascending is original IP, right?
I was just thinking of that. Yeah.
It's so easy for something like that to fail, and then for everybody to go, see, that's why we need to stick to established properties. But, I mean, it takes a lot for someone to create a whole universe from scratch.
I don't know about you guys, but when I first learned about filmmaking, I learned about film writing, and I wanted to do it myself, and I wanted to, basically take a crack at it. It was from Star Wars, basically. Like this is kind of where I was like, oh, like you can just sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and just like come up with this shit. Like that's incredible. I want to do that. And it's at that moment that you realize how hard it is to do this, because he makes it look so easy. And you can look at the prequels as being a great example of like how hit and miss that can be.
I connect that with being hungry and being well fed. That's how I look at it. When you're hungry and you're desperate, your creative juices are flowing like a freaking like Niagara Falls, right? But when you're set and you're like the guy, you're the guy, and you're surrounded by yes men who view you as like, wow, you're like the creator of Star Wars, man. You could do no wrong. Then that's what leads to disaster. And you mentioned earlier about the Wachowskis, Jupiter Ascending. That's a perfect example of that, because at that point they were the Wachowskis. But in the Matrix, they were still kind of unknown. They were very hungry. They're like, we got this idea. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. They had the energy. They had a producer who was behind them. And the Matrix was a huge success because of it. And so I think that a lot of the time you have a lot of the problems that come with success is you kind of lose your humility when you're successful. You kind of your ego gets boosted.
It's really interesting to look at that, and I think that during Lucas's best period, he had a tendency, and I think it maybe kind of hurt some of his relationships, to be successful and then bet everything again on his originality and his imagination. He became a millionaire because of American Graffiti, but he risked everything again on Star Wars, and he will do it again on Empire, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Let's move on to the performances. The best performance in this movie is clearly Alec Guinness, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's coming in bringing this gravitas to it. And again, there are so many aspects to the movie that make it this used universe and everything else, where you're like, okay, it has like a tactility to it. It feels real. But like, there are some performances in this movie that are kind of borderline bad.
Yeah.
But they work within the context of Star Wars. But Alec Guinness comes in and he delivers every line as if he believes what he's saying.
Yeah. He's the one that made Star Wars real. He's the one that convinced a whole generation of moviegoers that the Force is plausible in the movie because of the way he presented it. So yeah, I agree with that. Alec Guinness is obviously the best choice, and George Lucas should until the day he died, thank Alec Guinness for agreeing to be in this movie, because apparently Alec Guinness was very picky.
Well, from what I understand, like I think that with Alec Guinness, he was a highly revered Oscar-winning actor, and he was very picky about the stuff he did. And I guess when they sent him the script for Star Wars, he saw the name George Lucas and he recognized it from American Graffiti. And he was like, oh, I want to know what this is. And he opened it up and saw it was science fiction. He was like, oh no, like I don't want to do a sci-fi movie. And it's so weird to me that he like had this hesitancy to do it. And yet he rolls in like you believe he's from Star Wars. And I remember when I started to see Alec Guinness in other films like Bridge on the River Kwai and like Lawrence of Arabia,
I was like, hey, Obi-Wan.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, that's Obi-Wan. And yeah, he brings the same kind of, professionalism to his other roles. And he's a great actor. And yeah, this movie needed it.
What convinced Alec Guinness to take on the role? Was it something, did George Lucas call him personally, or did he just think about it thoroughly and went like, you know what, I'm going to do it because why not?
Weirdly enough, I don't know if you're going to believe this or not, but I think it had a little something to do with the money.
Okay. That makes sense.
But he was also like not happy about the fact that he was killed off. He wanted to be a part of, the franchise, and he was not, or I don't know if he wanted to be a part of the franchise, but for some reason he was not happy.
He probably wanted to do the whole movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what it was.
And yet it's a stroke of genius. You need to kill him off.
Yeah. And see that heroes self-sacrifice. That's what heroes do. They put their lives on the line, and when the time calls for it, they put their lives right at the forefront of danger. So that way, if they do go out, there's a sense of martyrdom that comes with that, and that will spread to the like, because Luke witnessed it, right? He witnessed that he put his lightsaber up, turned it off, and then he disappeared into the Force, and I think that was a big factor in the story for Luke's arc, where he had to see that, okay, being a hero is about being selfless, which was important in the story, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
The other performance that stuck out for me was Harrison Ford, man, Han Solo. He was the second best, in my opinion. Mark Hamill was the third, and then Carrie Fisher was the fourth for me, because the scene when they destroy her planet, it was like, dude, your entire planet has been destroyed. Your family, your friends, like, they're gone. And you're acting like as if like it was no big deal. Like, yeah, well, I just got to move on to the rebellion. I just feel like maybe that was maybe a poor director's choice. Because, really can't blame the actors too much, because the director is the one in charge of letting the actors know, okay, here's what I need from you. I need this from you. Like, get this scene down, right? And so I would imagine George Lucas being stressed out during the shoot was like, yeah, just go, just say your lines. Come on, we gotta hurry up. We gotta shoot
faster, more intense.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's funny. I was watching an interview with Carrie Fisher, and apparently there was a journalist who came to cover the making of the movie on the set, and they were there for a few days. And by the time they left, they still didn't know who the director was.
Nice.
And yeah, and I think it's something that Carrie Fisher has also mentioned, that it's very interesting. And I have my own theories about this in my headcanon, but that, Leia walks out with a blanket to cover this kid who just like lost his mentor that he had for like less than a day. And she just lost her entire planet. And it's one of the things that I love so much about this movie, is that she is in no way, shape, or form a damsel in distress. She gets saved by these bumbling morons, and she calls them out immediately. Like, yo, you saved me, but you didn't have a plan for getting out of here? Like, what is this shit? Like, this is amateur hour? I had to wonder, too, like, did Obi-Wan sense that Luke was crushing on his sister and therefore hired the most handsome pilot in the entire galaxy? Just like, okay, you need to steal this guy's crush because I can't let this happen, So it's an interesting thing too, where you have a character who's clearly the protagonist of this movie. He's the, swashbuckling hero of this, and then immediately gets cucked by Harrison Ford, who just slides into the booth, and he's like, Han Solo, I'm the captain of the Millennium Falcon. And you're like, okay, this is obviously a movie star. This is obviously his movie now. Sorry, Luke, you just got your movie taken away from you.
Yeah, the girl, the good girls like the bad boys, so it's only naturally fitting that would occur. especially when the bad boy looks like Harrison Ford.
I mean, that's really what it all comes down to.
Because even my wife, my wife last night when she was watching with me, she was like, "Wow, Harrison Ford was so dreamy." I was like, "Yeah." Oddly enough, my mom, she wasn't a big Star Wars fan, but she every time Han Solo would show up in the screen, she would stop what she was doing and just watch him. And then in Spanish, she would say, "Oh, my man," but in Spanish, she would say "mi galán." Oh, mi galán. And that's it. Every time he left the screen, she would go back to what she was doing.
I can completely understand that. Before we get on to our awards, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the legacy of this movie and, talk a little bit about the special editions. So, first of all, I find it really interesting that at the Oscars, they gave this movie the bulk of the Oscars. They just handed it every technical Oscar and then decided, but no, sorry, you didn't make the best movie. Clearly, Woody Allen made the best movie with Annie Hall. Bad choice.
Well, Annie Hall was a great film.
It was. So... It hasn't aged very well, and not just because of obvious reasons, but I do find it really interesting that this movie just got every award. But when it came time to saying okay, now we need to give Lucas something, they're like, no. We like what Woody Allen's selling over here. So,
well, think about it, James. I mean, the Oscars, that's what they do. When something is as successful as Star Wars, they're not going to give it all the awards because in their eyes, they're thinking, well, you made your money, so you're fine. You're fine. You don't need the Oscar for this. And also the Star Wars film itself, it's not perfect by any sense of the word. It's perfect in the sense of the structure of the story, the hero's journey, and the character arcs and all that stuff. But in terms of some of the dialogue, and even some of the pacing of not the pacing, but yeah, I would say the dialogue and some of the acting wasn't the greatest. And comparing it to Annie Hall, you had great performances. You had Diane Keaton, who was great in that film. You had Woody Allen, who was good in that film. Everyone in that film was great. The dialogue was great. The story was great. So, and it's Oscar being Oscar. They always want to award the movie that says something, right? Or that kind of explores an element in society or culture. And Star Wars didn't really do that. It was more of an entertainment popcorn flick. And I would imagine the Oscar committee at the time going we're not going to give an Oscar to this popcorn flick. Are you kidding me? No way. But that's just me because I hate the Oscars. So
I think they serve a purpose. And I do think that for me, when I finally did see Annie Hall, there was a part of me where I was like, I think I must have been late teens. And at that time, I was really exploring a lot of classic cinema. And I think I had that same moment where I was like, well, yeah, this is a better film than Star Wars, objectively. If I remove my bias and my fanboy, but no, now if I watch the two of them, I'm like, I still like Annie Hall a lot, but it's just weird to compare. Annie Hall feels so much like a movie of that era. And Star Wars is one of the few movies that feels so timeless. And it would have, I don't know. I definitely think there's that kind of maybe the same resentment that the Oscars had towards James Cameron when he made the highest grossing movie of all time again with Avatar. Yeah. And they're like, we're not going to give you an Oscar for this, bro. We gave you one for Titanic. You just made a $3 billion movie. So come on, we're not going to give you some Oscars for that.
Would you say that breakdown happens from time to time at the Oscars where they award a movie heavily on the technical side, but creatively it's almost like they say, it doesn't quite cut it?
Yes, there's two great examples in the 90s where they gave Terminator 2 and The Matrix a ton of technical awards, but did not even nominate those films in the major categories. And the most recent example is Mad Max Fury Road, which actually got nominated for Best Picture and Best Director and a whole bunch of other technical awards. And it won a ton of technical awards, but then it lost the Best Picture Oscar to Spotlight, which, is anybody eager to rewatch that movie?
Spotlight? What movie was that? Spotlight?
Exactly. My point exactly. So let's move on. So our initiation, at least, mine and Joseph's, our initiation to this movie was through the special editions, which would become one of the most controversial things in the history of movies, to go back and add special effects to the movie. And, we all were forced to rewatch this in its special edition format. And I got to ask you guys, how did you think that Jabba scene is aged?
Terribly. It's aged terribly.
It's embarrassing, right?
It's very embarrassing. And Lucas should have just not put in the scene in the movie in the first place. He should just kept it out because it didn't serve a purpose. He could have still waited for Return of the Jedi to introduce Jabba the Hutt. It would have been better to just have him mention Jabba the Hutt, but that's it. That's as far as it goes for that one.
To me, the most cringeworthy part of that scene is just how close Han Solo gets to Jabba. He's right up against him. I mean, isn't that guy like a little slimy?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
There really isn't a point in relitigating this because you know what? Nobody likes the choices that were made in special edition. The only thing I like is the state of the art restoration that's gone into it. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like it would be a monkey's paw if like we ever did get the unspecial editions, is because they'd be like, fine, you can have an unrestored version of it. And no, I want the polished version. Like, I think that restoration is very important when it comes to preserving films. And so, yeah, I think if and when we ever do finally get it, I really hope it's a fully restored version without any of the CGI.
The original Death Star explosion is very underwhelming. I felt like that was totally a worthwhile special edition change. It's kind of like this epic explosion in the special edition versus like a smoke bomb going off.
It's true. I watched the last time I saw the unspecial edition, I was in a film class and the teacher actually had it on Laserdisc. And
nice.
And while I was watching it, it was probably the moment that I realized maybe it's good to not get everything that you wish for, because when I saw those unrestored scenes, I was like, whoa, that looks really bad. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like graffiti on a movie. It's like he spray painted CGI on his movie. And it's off-putting. All right. So if you guys don't have any more thoughts on story, let's move on to our awards. Best ship or vehicle, Julius.
Okay. Number one for me was Luke's X-34 speeder hovercraft.
Great choice.
When I was a kid, I wanted that thing so bad. Not only as a toy, but I wish they were made in real life so that way I could have one. They're so cool, man. Like, it was like, wow, that's a nice little craft there. I want one. And I hope I'm alive as an old man and they invent one. So I can ride one before I die as an old man. Tesla, if you're listening, please invent one.
Oh, you know, Elon's got to be like R&Ding the shit out of that right now.
He's got to be figuring out, right? He's got to be writing the plans right now in his house. Like, I got to invent one for Julius. Second is the Jawa Sandcrawler vehicle. I've always liked that vehicle just because of the sheer size of it and being run by these little small, creatures, Jawas. And that always was cool for me. It was like, wow, these little guys they're like captains of this massive freaking, ship that like an ark, that goes through the desert, and they collect, all these old droids and they fix them and sell them as like a moving pawn shop of sorts to farmers.
It looks like a barn on wheels. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Joseph, what do you got?
Millennium Falcon. I mean,
it can't be anything else than that, right?
Yeah, there's one choice. I mean, in all of film, this is one of the most iconic vehicles there is. It's got sections, but it's also like flat, and it's making moves. It's going between walls. It's great.
So much of my initial love of Star Wars came from that ship, because it feels like a ship that should exist in real life. And I think, much of it, the exterior of it was actually built, and then you have the interior that just looks so great with all of that production design. It immediately captured my imagination, and I've actually got a little Millennium Falcon that's on my desk.
There you go.
But yeah, it has to be the Millennium Falcon.
You have a Lego one too, right?
I do. Yes, that one is not on my desk because it's large, so
it's pretty hefty.
It's nice. A big one. Yeah. My runner up was the Land Speeder, and it was for the exact reason that you said. I think as a kid, it resembles so much the type of car that you think is going to be your first car, the one that's sort of like hand me down kind of thing. Yeah. And yeah, I immediately jumped onto that when I was a kid, and I had to. I mean, like, these categories for this film are like choosing your favorite children. I mean, you've got X-Wings, you've got TIE fighters. There are so many amazing things, but yeah,
you're right. There are. It's just there's the obvious choices. I mean, obviously Millennium Falcon was an obvious choice, but
right.
It was too obvious. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pick something that's really close to my heart, and I thought the Speeder was the best choice for me.
Joseph and I are basic. What can I say?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that either.
One of the cool things about the X-Wing is that it's a one-seater that can go light speed. Luke can be in a dogfight, then just leave and go to a different system if he wants. It's not short range like a TIE fighter.
Can't imagine how much those must cost, the Rebels. Like when they're whoever's in charge of their military budget had to have been like just shaking their head during that Death Star run. Like, oh my God, we paid so much money for those X-Wings. Okay, best weapon, gadget, or tech, Joseph.
Anakin's lightsaber. Again, looking at it from the perspective of all cinema, the scene where Luke busts out the lightsaber and turns it on for the first time, it's like a revelation. It's one of the best scenes ever.
Did you read my notes? Because I also got Anakin's lightsaber.
Great minds.
How about you, Julius?
Yeah, well, to add to Joseph's thought, yeah, when you described Luke Skywalker turning on the lightsaber for the first time, I had the same experience when I first watched the film. It was that scene that was like, what the heck is that? A laser sword? Cool. And so I had the same reaction as Luke Skywalker did in the movie, was like mesmerized by this, woo, woo, woo. And I was like, wow, that thing looks really cool and really dangerous, and I love it. Best weapon and gadget for me was Han Solo's ESB DL-44 blaster.
Hell yeah.
So my favorite that I actually bought the toy years ago and I still have it to this day. And I wish I would have found it so I could have showed you guys on camera that I have the actual old school, and it still works to this day. It still works. It still does a choo, choo, choo. But yeah, that was my number one. Again, because the obvious choice was lightsaber. I didn't want to be too obvious because lightsaber obviously is cool. But I thought Han Solo's gun was like the second coolest thing because of how powerful that damn blaster was and how he's able to keep it, throughout all three movies.
Yeah, it's a great looking blaster.
Do you guys know offhand if Chewbacca's crossbow is in any of the scenes other than the Jabba insert in Special Edition?
That's a good question. I don't remember.
I don't remember seeing it either.
I mean, that's a pretty cool weapon, though.
It is cool.
Yeah, it is. That is a cool weapon.
And we'll get to it when we talk Force Awakens, but I find it very hard to believe that they've been hanging out for 50 years, and it wasn't until Force Awakens that Han Solo was like, hey, let me try that crossbow. I mean, come on. Okay, best droid. You know what? I'm gonna go on this one. Obviously, you got your R2s and your 3POs, but I was trying to be a little out of the box here, and I'm going with R5D4. Now this droid is the one whose motivator blows, and this droid basically,
I'm curious to know why.
I would say maybe like single-handedly saved the galaxy, because when he was chosen by Owen, R2 beeps at this droid and tells him, please blow your motivator because I'm on a secret mission to Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so R5 listens, and who knows what his fate was at that point, but he took one for the team and blew his motivator so that R2 could finish his mission. And you can even see R2 excitedly like jumping up and down. And I imagine he's basically saying, thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's a great observation, James. I have never made that observation before, but wow, that's a good one.
I really love the torture droid and how menacing and weird that thing is. It's got needles. It's also like, it's round, but it's not perfectly round, and it feels like there's a sinister reason for that.
Yeah,
he's like a pocket knife of evil, right? Just like anything you need, it's there.
You're right. He is a pocket knife of evil.
Okay, best alien or creature, Joseph. What do you got?
I really like the Tusken Raiders. I just love how they're somehow it's so easy to understand what their way of life is like, and they're so fully formed, but just kind of off in the background.
I don't know if you know the story that when they shot the attack of the Tusken Raider on Luke, that the actor, I guess, like had the staff up in the air, and then he lowered it, and they realized it wasn't a very convincing scene. So the editor looped him doing that over and over. So it actually looks like he's raising it up and down in like a warrior thing. And then they added the sound effects for his vocals. And like, yeah, that's one of those things that like I always, always catches my eye when I watch the movie is when he, raises it up and down, and it's like that was never shot that way. It was just from the the genius behind the editing.
You gotta love editors sometimes. They can save your movie.
Yeah, and your podcast.
Yeah. And Marsha Lucas, she played a big role in saving that movie when she edited the last few minutes of the film.
Yeah, it is a movie that the more you know about filmmaking, you really see how like, okay, this thing really came together in the editing room.
Yeah.
What did you get for Alien?
Greedo. I was sad that he died so soon. He had a great look. I like that fact that he was even though you couldn't really see too much of his facial expression because the way they created the character. But I just like that he was so cold-blooded as a mercenary himself. And I wish that they didn't kill him off right away. I would have preferred he got the Boba Fett treatment where he remained alive and show up later in other films. Because I thought Greedo had so much potential to be a great adversary to Han Solo. Maybe he could also have been an adversary to Boba Fett, who maybe, competing to get Han Solo to get back to Jabba the Hutt. But it is what it is. But Greedo was my best alien creature.
I want to put a pin in that because I'm going to bring him up a little bit later. But for mine, I picked a really obscure alien called a Wookiee and Chewbacca. I mean, I don't know how it could be anybody else. Like I was thinking about Tusken Raiders and Jawas and, any one of the different aliens in the Mos Eisley Cantina. But then I was like, wait, no, it's staring me right in the face. It's Chewbacca. Like, I mean, Chewie's the best, he's great. Wookiees are great. I want one. Best location or planet, Julius, what do you got?
Mos Eisley. I really loved Mos Eisley because it had a Western feel to it, but with a bunch of aliens, which was cool, which was what I loved about it. And that bar scene, you can't go wrong with that bar scene, especially the, I forget the character's name, where he's wanted in 12 systems and he gets his arm chopped off by Obi-Wan. And Mos Eisley for me was like quintessential Star Wars.
How about you, Joseph?
Well, I had chosen Mos Eisley, but let me give a shout out to the Tantive 4, which is a location that has a pretty distinct look. And we start out there. But then as the rest of the trilogy and the prequels go on, it becomes kind of a distant memory. But then it becomes this really interesting shorthand for that A New Hope era. Mm-hmm. For instance, when we're at the end of episode 3 or the end of Rogue One, you're looping back around into the beginning when you see those guys with the weird backwards helmets or the stacked up engines in the back.
Yeah, I kind of cheated on this one and picked the Death Star just because, like, you know what? I think it might be a cool hang, especially if you're high up in the ranks. I'm sure they've got like a really cool food court there and like they've got to have like entertainment and shit going on. Like, I bet.
Yeah, but it's all evil, sinister entertainment like that opera from episode 3.
Oh, yeah, it's just that. It's only that. Most satisfying kill or death, Joseph, what do you got?
Ponda Baba.
Yeah, he had to go.
Who was the guy at the Mos Eisley Cantina who doesn't like you.
And why? Is it his blonde hair and blue eyes? Like, come on.
Maybe because he looked like a Nazi. He didn't like Nazis.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and also Mos Eisley was a very multicultural bar too, with all sorts of alien life forms.
Yeah, but they draw the line at droids. They're just like, we're openly racist against droids. Sorry. They're gonna have to wait aside.
Yeah, which was odd. Most satisfying kill or death for me was Obi-Wan Kenobi, because it sets motion to Luke's story, and like I said, I'm a sucker for heroism in films and stories. So the fact that he chose not to keep on fighting Darth Vader in front of Luke and decided, you know what, this is my time, this is my opportunity to give Luke a lesson that he needs to learn about being a hero. And it was very satisfying to see him just smile at him, kind of like a last wink, and then gone to the Force, because he was ready to go. He's ready to take the next step.
I thought about Obi-Wan because it is a meaningful death and it is satisfying in its own way. But then I thought about Grand Moff Tarkin while I was watching the movie, and I was like, you know what? This guy blew up Alderaan. I love that line where they even offer to give him a shuttle to leave the Death Star, and he's like, evacuate in this moment of triumph. And I just love how like assured he is that they're going to win. And like they finally got rid of the Senate. He's finally able to do whatever he wants. He can just blow up any planet he wants at that point. Palpatine has his back. And yeah, no, he dies. Like if you think about Rogue One, they've had this Death Star for like, it's, you know, like in the Robot Chicken, like it's not even paid off, you know, at this point.
Right.
And they've had this thing for a day and it gets blown up. Like Tarkin goes out looking like a fool.
But you have to give Grand Moff Tarkin credit for sticking to his guns and not blinking in the face of death, even when at the moment where he might end up losing the Death Star. So you got to give Grand Moff Tarkin credit for that. He stuck to his guns.
Best Force move, Julius.
Jedi mind trick.
This is mine too. This is mine too.
Yeah, Jedi mind trick was number one. Number two was the Force choke, because I loved how the Force is neutral, but you can use it for either good or evil things. You know, and it was cool to see Obi-Wan not use it the way Darth Vader used it on one of his generals. Just pretty much, you know, waving his hand like, these aren't the droids you're looking for, you know, we can move along. And that was cool. I love that aspect of the Force when it was introduced in Star Wars. And of course, the downside, well, not the dark side to that, is the freaking choking him. Like, I find your lack of faith disturbing. You know, and it's funny. My wife actually, she told me a joke last night. She was like, it'd be funny if he was like, you know, this is pretty cool if you handle yourself and choke yourself at the same time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I don't think Anakin really has the ability to do that anymore, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure he could choke himself, but that's about it. What do you have, Joseph?
It's not a Force move, but I noticed that this move was happening a lot. Apparently in the Star Wars universe, if you want to lock a door, you can just shoot the door button and it's fine. That happens like at least 4 times in A New Hope that I noticed. Somebody's just like, psh, okay, cool, problem solved.
I mean, they're not really using the Force for that, but it does solve a lot of problems. Yeah. That's for sure. Okay, character most deserving of their own spinoff. Joseph, what do you got?
Han Solo, and he got it, and I felt like it was worthwhile.
Oh, controversial pick. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that when we get to Solo.
I'll agree with you there, Joseph. I actually did enjoy Solo.
Julius, what do you got?
I have Wedge.
Yeah.
Wedge, because he survives all 3 movies, the only X-Wing fighter to survive the 3 films. And so I feel that he probably deserves his own spinoff as maybe, I don't know, a general of the New Republic or a pilot.
I would love to see what he got into after Return of the Jedi and how he fit into the aftermath and maybe the politics of forming the New Republic and everything else. I wanted to think a little bit outside the box on this one for myself. And this is where I'm going to bring up Greedo. And I was thinking it would be amazing to have like a spin-off film about the week leading up to his death and have it be kind of like an Uncut Gems type of film where just like Greedo's just like getting shit on by everybody, but he keeps like doubling down, keeps betting. And it's this one last thing where he like gets told, hey, I just spotted Han Solo at the Mos Eisley Cantina. You owe this much money. All you got to do is just take him in and deliver him to Jabba, and you're going to get this money. And then he gets shot in the face at the very end. Spoilers for Uncut Gems, but
that'd be great. That'd be great.
And also, it's very interesting to me, if you look at the cutting, that Han and Chewie are leaving Mos Eisley, and Chewie just like walks away as Greedo's coming in. Like, how did he not see Greedo coming and go like, oh, wait, Han's not behind me anymore?
Yeah. And it's like, come on, Chewie, you have a life debt.
And maybe he's trying to get out of that. Maybe he's just trying to be willfully naive about it. He's like, this is my way out.
Whoops.
Okay, there's going to probably be some overlap here. But best character overall, Julius.
Grand Moff Tarkin for me.
Wow. Okay. That's a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, Han Solo came a close second. But, again, Han Solo was the obvious choice because he did shine of all the 3 actors, the new ones, he did shine the most. But Grand Moff Tarkin to me was like, upon watching it last night, I was like, man, this guy, talk about someone who's all in his like role as a general in the new empire and has no problem using the Death Star to destroy an entire planet of people just to find out where the fucking rebels are hiding at. What makes it even worse is that when he does pressure Leia to tell him where the rebels are hiding and she tells him, he still blows up the planet.
It's an interesting choice that the film makes to basically introduce the greatest villain in the history of movies, but like kind of make him sort of like a subordinate to Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah.
Like when he starts to choke Admiral Mahdi, and it's Moff Tarkin that steps in and says, hey, you can't do that. That's even like over the line for him, and he's about to go blow up a planet. So that's very interesting.
Right, exactly.
Marty must be like his bud that he hangs out on the Death Star and goes to those weird operas with. But yeah, anyways, Joseph, who do you got?
I would say that Han Solo is my best overall.
Yeah, Han Solo is really the kind of the human anchor of this entire story.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much he brings to the movie 40 minutes in, and you just feel like he's been in the movie that entire time. Like, he's just immediately such an incredible character. He might be my favorite character in the entire series. A lot of that has to do with Harrison Ford. And yeah, it's interesting to me at the awards ceremony at the end, which it's very weird to me that they had the time to assemble all of those people together for the award ceremony, even though the Empire now knows where they're located. Like, a lot of planning had to go into that ceremony. And they're like, no, we're going to do this on Yavin before we evacuate. But anyway, I kind of got the vibe during that awards ceremony when Leia gives him the medal. I think they've already hooked up at that point. But yeah, there's no way to really know. Okay, best line, Joseph.
This one's a little random, but when Porkins dies, he says, "It came from behind."
I mean, of all of the great, deep philosophical lines in the movie, you're just like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes it comes from behind, you know? Julius, what do you got?
I have a few, but number one for me was obviously the "if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine," when he was dueling with Darth Vader, which ended up being true because he played a major role in guiding Luke to use the Force when he took down the Death Star. So that was a great line. And the second one I have is the "who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?" which was a scene where they were at Obi-Wan's house and they gave that line. That was a great line, I thought.
Well, no, that comes on the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
Comes
right.
out
Oh, yeah, you're right. I thought it was
But no, like, mine is actually an Obi-Wan line as well. It's, "you've taken your first step into a larger world," which I don't know, like, that's always a line that comes to me. Like, anytime I discover something for the first time, I'll tell that to myself, which is really sad. But it's also something that I bring up to anybody when they've like discovered something new that I've recommended. I'm like, "You've taken your first step into a larger world." But it also just kind of goes to show that Obi-Wan probably has the best lines in this movie, and it could be like a tie between every single one of them.
Yeah, okay.
So, peak Star Wars moment. Joseph, it's the big one. The entire movie's a peak Star Wars moment. So.
Yeah.
It really is, but
Absolutely.
What you just said about Obi-Wan is so true, because the peak Star Wars moment that I picked, and I feel like this is one of those splices of 2 or 3 seconds that can define the whole saga, is when Luke is in the X-Wing and Obi-Wan Force says to him, "The Force will be with you always." It's just chills.
And it's also when he he's deactivating the computer, and everything is like, it's amazing the way the whole entire movie is kind of tied up in a bow at that exact moment, because you have all of these things that are about to happen. The planet could blow up, the Empire could win, Vader could kill Luke, but Han comes back in at the last moment, again proving why he's the best character. And he takes out that guy, and then Vader's bumbling pilot runs into him and spins him off out of control, and all of that comes together. And yeah, you're right. It's that moment where it just brings the entire thing together. What do you have, Julius?
The same. Yeah, Han Solo returning. That was for me optimal, Star Wars peak moment. And also Luke trusting the Force, actually trusting it and not relying on the computer to take out the Death Star. And of course, that X-Wing fight in the end was another peak Star Wars moment for me. Yeah, Han Solo returning was definitely a great moment where everything, like you say, everything came together. And I also want to mention too that scene when he's collecting his money, he's about to leave. And I thought it was a very touching scene, even though it was very short, how he tells Luke, he's like, "Hey, Luke," and he turns around and he tells him genuinely, "May the Force be with you." Giving them a sense of hey, I'm a believer now. I actually do believe that, because I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand with this old man Obi-Wan. He's actually showed me that that's real. Holy crap, that actually is the real thing. And I thought that was a very touching moment, that it kind of solidified their friendship, and it kind of gave you a hint that perhaps he was going to come back, but you still don't know because he's still taking the money.
It's because he tells him, he says, "May the Force be with you," and even Chewie chimes in come on, this is really cold. We're really going to just leave these guys hanging, like, you know.
Yeah.
and yeah,
Right,
it's not enough to say it. He has to show it. And yeah, when he comes back, it's one of the most satisfying moments in any movie that I've ever seen. But it's not the moment I chose. And I thought about choosing that, but there's one moment I chose that to me may be the most defining moment in Star Wars for me. And it's the binary sunset. It's the Force theme. It's Luke looking out onto the twin suns.
Oh,
and
right.
it's the thing that Star Wars is so good at doing is that it's such a ridiculous concept for a story, and yet it can be so sublime in its best moments. And I think that is that moment where it's wordless, and yet it speaks to everybody. You don't need any language to convey what is happening in that moment. And it just, it's just great the way it looks. I love the composition of the shot of the the little hut with the sunset in the background, and Luke just looking off on the horizon, and his life is about to change, and he doesn't know it yet. And to me, that defines Star Wars.
Oh, that's a good choice. That's a great choice.
So let's give our final thoughts and our personal rating. I'm going to go with Joseph first.
A New Hope works as kind of a microcosm of the entire saga. And it's so interesting to me that even though Star Wars has become this sprawling property, universe, franchise, there was a moment in history where this movie was all of Star Wars. And it carries that weight. I mean, it's a 10 out of 10. This is the best that cinema gets right here.
Yeah, I'll agree with a lot of what Joseph said. It really is a phenomenon. It's become a huge phenomenon now. But at the time, I can only imagine people who were not accustomed to big sci-fi operas like Star Wars. This must have been so refreshing after a decade of down-to-earth, grounded dramas that were kind of taking over the Hollywood system. So this was definitely for them a fresh a breath of air, that they finally had some kind of a new form of escapism from the terrible things that were happening in the country during the late 70s. And this film definitely was a film that captured both children's and adults' imaginations, and was able to connect with both adults and children. As far as my rating, I would still, it's not the most perfect movie still for me, because some of the acting is still okay. The dialogue was all right. But I'm still going to give it a 9 out of 10 because...
Oh, you led me on. I thought this was going to be a perfect 10.
No, it's going to be a 9 for me because cinematic wise, it like I said, it's not the perfect movie, but it is a perfect movie in the sense that it delivers for the audiences. But in terms of like, I guess you could say the structure or like the details within this piece of work, it still needed some work because obviously George Lucas' weak points is dialogue and working with actors to give what he needs in the performance. He kind of lets the actors do their thing, and directors typically are the ones who need to direct the actors to get what he needs for his story. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for me.
So, I mean, I was just basically opened up my thoughts by saying that I think this is on a short list for greatest movie of all time. And it may be my favorite Star Wars. So like, we're very much in like sacred cow territory when it comes to the original trilogy.
Right.
And so we're setting a really high bar for what is going to be coming. This one's easily a 10 for me, but I, again, for the sake of creating our average, I do like the idea of us, kind of going the pitchfork route. And like, I just did the math. And so it looks like our Breaking Canon average is going to be a 9.6. And hey, that's really high. That's pretty great.
That is really high. Yeah.
It makes me wonder if we're going to get any perfect 10s. I have a feeling we will. There's one obvious one that sticks out to me as probably going to be a perfect 10, The Last Jedi. But but yeah, so we'll just have to see. So yeah, like 9.6 is it looks like that's our average for our first entry.
Star Wars: A New Hope, Episode 4, 9.6 out of 10.
All right, guys, I think that about wraps it up. You can find more episodes of our show at breakingcanonpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at SWBC Podcast. If you want to support our show, please give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. On the next episode of Breaking Canon, we'll be discussing 1980s Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Until then, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.